Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Blockchain Talks. Today we are having a full night full of experts who is going to talk about transformative and very exciting journey that is ahead of us. So we are going to talk about more on the DAO and what is DAO. So our colleagues will explain a little bit more about that and how we can apply to UN world. Last time we had a discussion on digital identity, and today we are entering to this new and exciting topic. Today we have Mariana with us, Mariana who is going to moderate the whole session. Mariana is a DAO policy expert and co-founder of Black Fogel. So Mariana, I'm giving words to you to introduce our speakers and to lead our interesting session.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. So welcome everyone. The first thing to say is that ideally we get a lot of questions from you because this is a space for you to ask questions to experts and get some more information. So if you have questions through the presentations, just feel free to drop them in the box and we are gonna pick it up at the end. Well, as it was said before, my name is Mariana Larroche. I'm a lawyer by training. Actually, I started my career on the development sector as well. So I was working for different NGOs and in humanitarian settings back in Colombia. And then in looking at how technology could help us achieve and do the job better, I came out into blockchain, and that was over almost 10 years ago, quite a long time. And since then, I've been working with different projects in the interception of technology, regulation, and social impact. And we are going to discuss a little bit more what that means probably later on. But with me, there is really cool speakers today, experts in the topic of DAO, but from different perspectives. So you are going to get a sense of the different flavors we can have when we discuss DAOs. So I'm going to ask each of you to start with a little bit presentation of who you are and what do you do, and basically why are we talking about DAOs with you. So let's start with Bill.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bill Laboon. I'm Director of Education and Governance Initiatives at Web3 Foundation in Zug, Switzerland. So I am coming from a technical background. I used to teach computer science at the University of Pittsburgh, and before that, a software engineer. But why I'm here now is as my role in the Polkadot ecosystem, where we sort of say that we're the world's largest DAO, that we have all decisions for our blockchain are made by the DOT holders. And so we have had over 1,500 referenda, some of which passed, some of which didn't. And we have a treasury of approximately 150 million US dollars, where that all decisions for where that's spent are also sent by the DAO. So a lot of experience with the DAO, been working with it since its inception, really about 5 years ago. So yeah, that's why I'm here and why I like to talk about DAOs.
Thank you, Bill. Let's go with you, Nina.
Thank you, Mariana. Yeah, my name is Nina Siedler. I'm a German lawyer based in Berlin, and I am quite a long time already in this space. And actually, it kind of kicked off with the DAO back in 2016, where I happened to get somehow into the coordinated channel and was shouting, "What are you doing? This is regulated business," and nobody wanted to listen to me. And since then, I give legal talks and also formed a legal think tank in Luxembourg, the Think Block Tank, where we brought together lawyers and academics to discuss the regulation in the blockchain space, and later moved on to INATBA, the International Association of Trusted Blockchain Applications, where I actually met you, Mariana. Yeah, so I'm highly interested in translating what the software developers are doing into the legal realm.
Thank you, Nina. And then Ram.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ram. I've been working with DAOs since 2022, and I've been in this space since 2017, primarily because I'm fascinated by how this technology can bring more integrity to the systems we're all part of. I'm currently on the governance team at the Arbitrum Foundation. The Arbitrum Foundation is an operational steward to the Arbitrum DAO. And the Arbitrum DAO is what actually controls, owns, and governs the Arbitrum blockchains. If you haven't heard of Arbitrum, Arbitrum is a layer 2 blockchain built upon Ethereum, which means that it aims at making Ethereum faster and cheaper. And in my opinion, Arbitrum DAO is the best example of decentralized and autonomous governance being applied at scale, because since day one, the governance token holders have been in full control of the Arbitrum protocol, meaning any upgrades, any spend from its treasury can be made by the DAO, and they can execute on these decisions without relying on anyone. In terms of activity, there have been close to 400 temperature check proposals, over 70 formal proposals, including 10 software upgrades, and the DAO has spent over $1 billion ARB from its treasury in the last year and a half. There are almost 400,000 people who have delegated their voting power, and almost 250,000 people who have actually signed up to vote and be delegates in the DAO. So super active and excited to dive deeper into this today.
Thank you, Ram. And then, Dino, I'm gonna also ask you to not only do an introduction of you, but like start kicking in like directly with like a presentation. I know you have like some slides of what was the experiment that was run on the working group of the IGF.
Perfect. Thank you, and happy to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dino Delatra. I'm the Chief Information Officer of the United Nations Pension Fund. I'm based in New York. I've been with the United Nations for 25 years. My background is in IT auditing for several years before being appointed CIO of the UN Pension Fund. I was the Chief IT Auditor of the United Nations, and I was familiar with the blockchain fundamentally for its purpose of creating immutable records of corroborating evidence of audit. However, when I became CIO, I was presented with this challenge of addressing an historical problem that the UN Pension Fund had vis-a-vis the proof of life of our 80,000 beneficiaries residing in more than 192 countries. In addressing this issue, I indeed use blockchain along with biometrics and facial recognition, artificial intelligence and geolocalization. The digital identity solution went live in 2021 and also gave input to a wider initiative that now is called the UN Digital ID. And you probably have listened, if participated to the previous event, Max Marelli, my dear colleague, who is the director of the UN Digital ID. Because I'm an obsessed auditor, I keep working even as a CIO using the framework of an auditor. And one of my second priority after designing and implementing the solution was how to provide assurance, credibility, trustworthiness to a solution that uses emerging technologies, such as a blockchain, such as biometrics, such as artificial intelligence. And very soon I learned that when you're dealing with emerging technologies, you're dealing with emerging standards. So as a former ISO auditor, I spent most of my career in conducting audits in accordance with ISO standard. And I was trying to do the same thing when I was working on the digital identity solution for the UN Pension Fund. And then I realized that, for example, as of today, there are no yet ISO certifiable standard for blockchain. So I started my quest to find like-minded people that share my concern about assurance of blockchain. And this is where I came across the Government Blockchain Association in Washington, D.C., with whom I co-authored the blockchain maturity model and other supplement in various areas. I also started participating with the NATPA, the Global Blockchain Business Council, and other entities that work in this sphere. In so doing, I also realized that there is a great initiative within the United Nations system called the United Nations Internet Governance Forum. It's an initiative that has been taking place for 20 years, and that is intended to be multi-stakeholders. It's not only for UN, it's not only for member states, but it's intended to bring together instead also representative private sector, academia, civil society, technical community. And within this umbrella, the IGF, that I'm going to briefly share with you today, there are so-called dynamic coalition, informal working group that are thematically focused on specific topics. So within this dynamic coalition, I created in particular, one dynamic coalition on blockchain assurance standardization, and most recently another one on emerging technologies. But today I'm going to share with you our initial experience in setting up this dynamic coalition, and most importantly, also in trying to govern ourselves through a DAO in accordance with the principle, the mandates, and the objectives of the United Nations Internet Governance Forum. So with your permission, I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see
we can see
my
it.
screen. Perfect. I'm going to put it into slideshow, so hopefully is it visible? And let me know also if the slides move.
It is and is moving.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. So this is the screenshot of the website of the UNIGF. If you are interested in learning more, go to www.intgovforum.org, where you will find all the information. And there is an annual event that takes place in a different country. This year, it will take place in June 23-27 in Norway. And this is the web page within the IGF that is dedicated to this dynamic coalition that I created with the president, Gerard Daché, of the Government Blockchain Association, GBA, that is the hosting entity of this working group. So by going into this webpage, you will learn about our mandate, our plan of action, the membership, which, by the way, it's open to anyone who's interested, and it does not incur any type of fees to be included. So very briefly, what are dynamic coalition? Dynamic coalition are entities recognized by the UNIGF, but are not UN entities, are informal, are basically created in order to support working group on specific issues, are intended to be flexible and to have an innovative, if you will, governance structure, hence their suitability, for example, for an experiment, which is the experiment, the pilot that we are conducting in using a DAO, a Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And is intended to support exactly what I alluded to before, this principle of multi-stakeholderism, bringing together UN, of course, but also government, industry, private sector, civil society, academia, and technical community. Just as an aside, Microsoft, Google, Meta are part of this initiative at the IGF. ICANN is part of this initiative. So there are very relevant individuals and entities. The objective of our pilot in the DAO is to operate through a DAO in order to govern our own operation, our own mechanism of proposing and approving and making decision vis-a-vis initiative of the dynamic coalition on blockchain assurance and standardization. In accordance with what? With the principle of enhancing transparency, participation, and effectiveness of the internet governance process. So we are looking at strengthening coordination. We are one of the 32 dynamic coalition. As I alluded to before, they are thematically organized. So we are focusing on blockchain, but there are other, for example, focusing on internet security, on accessibility, protection of children online, and so forth and so on. While preserving autonomy, while creating and providing a technical foundation also in the future, hopefully, for cross-chain governance among, we want to give an example to the other dynamic coalition and stimulate their interest in also for them to adopt our mechanism of DAO, and of course to be guided by the IGF principle. So what are the challenges? The challenge is that we need to have a careful consideration of the existing mandate and the framework of the UNIGF. And therefore we ask ourselves, how is such success looks like? It looks like if we are able to demonstrate that through a DAO, we are able to comply and to demonstrate compliance with transparency, with inclusiveness, by addressing also the legal uncertainty that unfortunately exists in this domain, and by offering technical interoperability. So the commitment here is ensuring and supporting equal participation through the compliance with the principle of transparency and inclusiveness that has to be reflected in the operational mechanism of the DAO itself. For example, in the smart contract architecture that we are planning to implement in order to demonstrate that we have a fair, transparent, and inclusive approach to submit proposal to the dynamic coalition and to approve them by enabling censor-resistant on-chain governance across multiple blockchains, and therefore increase participation and flexibility. Indeed, this is implicit for me to say that an expectation of the IGF, its dissent needs to be acknowledged and recorded. So it's not about a majority wins, but it's about listening to everybody, making decisions, but also respecting dissenting opinion. The approach is to be intended to be a multi-phase development through a development strategy. By first and foremost, we ask ourselves, what is the problem that through a DAO we intend to resolve and what are the benefits? So the benefit are indeed those principles, transparency, inclusiveness, participation, censor resistance that I mentioned before. And the idea is, however, that being able, through a DAO, through a technology, to support a system where tokens are distributed in accordance with those categories, multi-stakeholder, and in accordance also to subject matter expertise. Because although we are part of this large entity called the IGF, we also want to make sure that we remain close to our mandate, which within the dynamic coalition, we have a specific mission to support and to demonstrate and to recommend best practices for blockchain assurance and standardization. So this is indeed our second attempt. We started 2 years ago. We adopted one specific platform, which unfortunately did not meet our expectation, was not user-friendly, was very convoluted, was very complex. So now we are making a second attempt by using Aragon that has and provides a certain benefit. For example, replicable plugin system, is also suitable for multi-chain capability vis-a-vis our future-proofing goal of also supporting other dynamic coalition. It has almost a zero gas fee, and therefore it's very suitable for an environment where we need to accommodate every entity, both in the first, and the second, the third, and the fourth world, so that also developing country can participate without incurring cost. Also, the smart contract supported by Aragon are usually considered to be easy to read and to understand, and also support anonymity. So we have operational requirements that derive from the high-level principle, for example, of inclusivity. We need to include, but also avoid decision paralysis. We need to balance efficiency with consensus building. We need to accommodate the global nature of the IGF and therefore be mindful about the fact that there are individuals that live in a different time zone. We need to preserve the specific focus of the IGF that is specifically, even more important, the dynamic coalition that are intended to be bottom-up, not necessarily top-down. Actually, dynamic coalition are practical, tangible experiment to provide this deliverable. And of course, also provide opportunity for capacity building. So, as I alluded to before, we are also looking at the future, trying to look at the ability, once we demonstrate that the DAO work within one dynamic coalition, our own, try to propose its benefit, its value proposition to the other 31 dynamic coalition. And therefore, we need to ensure that we can demonstrate robust interoperability amongst potential chain, ability to coordinate with other dynamic coalition this governance mechanism, support cross-chain governance solution, and also support smart contract interaction, while in accordance with the concept of transparency and accountability, include audit trails and public documentation vis-a-vis our decision-making process. So we are looking also at supporting what is the overarching coordination. These 32 dynamic coalition are coordinated by the Dynamic Coalition Coordination Group, the DCCG model. So there is an entity within the IGF that coordinates and supports our communication in order to find opportunity for interaction and collaboration. So the DAO needs to address also not only the governance within the DAO dynamic coalition, but also outside the dynamic coalition with a higher level governing body and mechanism through a meta-governance layer, through consensus-based principle and guideline, and of course by offering a standardized format that can support interaction and oversight by other entities. So let's, I conclude, let's also look, of course, at the challenges that have already been alluded to by Nina, which is about the jurisdictional compliance. The fact that as of now, there is uncertainty about the legal nature of DAO, especially within an international platform such as the UNIGF. So we need to be mindful of this, and we are working together. We engage also with legal experts, and definitely we are looking forward to engage with additional subject matter expertise that can contribute and help us to address this issue, especially in an environment. In addition to jurisdictional issue, there are also the expectation that being the UN, we're operating within the UN, also we need to comply and demonstrate accountability vis-a-vis, for example, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that's it from me, my presentation. I hope that I was able to provide an adequate context and background about the issue. Back to you, Mariana.
Thank you, Dino. It's really enlightening how you presented, because I think that like at the end, and just to put it in more simple words, what the experiment was about is to try to find a new way of coordinating a lot of people that are like going for the same goal across different regions, across different time zones, in a way that we can not only incentivize more participation of these people and more engagement, but also in a way that is transparent for those inside and outside the group on how the decisions are being made, who makes them, and basically how we are operating, in a way that is also doing, as you explained it, top down, so everyone feel part of the process. I guess we have a lot of people in the UN here, so you know that this is basically how we always try to operate when we work with communities. So it's really, really complicated, some of the parts, or like bringing all of these puzzles together to actually push forward. And the experiment really was about to just see if technology can facilitate that. So that coordination. I think that you mentioned a couple of things that will resonate a lot with my colleagues here, which is the user-friendly part that I know is one of the main issues that we have with complex technologies. Explaining it like in simple words is really difficult. And the other part, you mentioned it as well, is like crossing borders, crossing jurisdiction implies that there is like also different regulatory frameworks. I saw something really clever today, someone that also studies DAOs, and is a really good friend, and she said that DAOs are like cats. And I actually thought that she was talking about Sri and cat, like, I don't know if you heard of them. And I was like, is she referring that if the concept of DAO is dead or alive and we are just like trying to call DAO something that is not? She actually was referring to the fact that cats fit into different boxes and they like the box, they like to go into boxes. So I found it really, really clever the way that she presented it, because it's true. And with that, I actually want to jump first to you, Nina, to hear a little bit about what has been your experience and how this has been managed from your perspective, especially when we are talking about the UN that goes to every corner of the world. What are the things that we will need to consider at the regulatory level when we are building these communities? You're mute.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, you know, the main and first question is always, what is it, legally speaking? What is a DAO from a legal perspective? And for this, you need to have a basic understanding about like corporate law. And the way it works more or less around the globe is that you have a specific number of legal entities which are accepted to hold rights and assets themselves. So we have natural persons, us, right, who can hold rights and assets, and we have legal persons. And those legal persons, basically, you know, they are human inventions, right? It's not like a tree outside that is existing. It is something that we came up with to organize ourselves, right? So if there is not a legal entity in the law already, you cannot simply come up with a new thing like a DAO and say, hey, this thing now is a separate entity and it can hold legal rights or assets. So what we then do is, first of all, we look into the existing ones and see, can we squeeze a DAO in the existing legal system somewhere? The main issue is that basically in all mature jurisdictions, any legal entity that provides for a liability shelter of its shareholders or partners needs to be registered somewhere, right? Because what you want to avoid is that somebody, incurs obligations and then basically disappears, right? So if it's not a natural person, but a legal person, typically that thing needs to be registered somewhere. DAOs are typically not registered anywhere, right? So then the only thing that remains is what I like to call the default entity. A lot of jurisdictions know these default entities, which are created when you do not explicitly choose one of the other existing legal entity types and, follow all the formalities that come with it, like notarization and registration. Then you fall into, that default entity. In Germany, that is the civil law partnership, right? So if 3 people get together, play cards in the evening, they all throw some money into the pot and then somebody wins, they basically for that night formed such a civil law partnership, right? The problem with these is that they typically come with unlimited liability for everybody involved. And that is something you don't really want when you talk about, you heard the numbers that are organized by the DAOs represented in this call. You don't want to have personal liability for such a huge thing. So that is typically the dilemma that we see with regards to DAOs in the legal realm.
I have a follow-up question, Nina, sorry, because I think that for the particular case, as just like, let's take one really concrete, because I think that is important to land in examples. But in the case of Dino, for example, there is a working group inside of the IGF. What will be the situation that we are looking here?
Yeah, I think I can calm down here everybody a bit because, in this specific case, I would say it is not a separate legal entity, right? It is more a technical tool to support this informal group. The things change a bit once you start accepting funds or donations, right? Then it starts to get difficult again because assets can only be held by a natural or legal person. So in that case, I can only strongly recommend to the 2 coordinators that they decide and that they fix it in writing for their files where the donation is actually going to, right? In this specific case, the GBA or the UN, right? And take it from there. But as long as, this is merely used as a technical tool to support votings and stuff, I think nobody needs to be scared.
Great, and that's actually like the perfect entrance to Ramen. Dina will just like give you the follow-up, but I think that here is just like a really important click because distributing funds is most of the job of these foundations, right? When we look at like the Polkadot ecosystem or like other ecosystems as well, like Ram, I think that you mentioned it as well, you use it for like the distribution of the community fund. So there is already some fund, whether it's on tokens that are involved and that needs to be distributed. So my question to you guys is like, how are like those community process happening? And it's also like a tool that you see more from the management and transparency of your communities and the engagement of your communities, or if you can walk us a little bit through a little bit more on how it works in your 2 ecosystem, it will be great. And then Dino, we come back to your question if that is okay. Who wants to start?
I can start. So in Arbitrum, as I mentioned, it's the DAO, the token holders that have the ultimate authority over A, upgrades of the protocol, but B, as you mentioned, how funds from its treasury are spent. So the Arbitrum DAO treasury contains 35% of all ARB tokens, and to date, it has kind of funded multiple initiatives. I guess over the course of the last 2 years, many initiatives have been proposed to the DAO. Typically, this means a post is written to a forum, it's discussed for a week, then there is an initial round of voting just to get a temperature check, really. So like a first draft of voting to understand if this is something the DAO would actually be interested in doing. If this initial round of voting passes, there are some more tweaks and modifications. And then there is the final round of voting, which actually happens on chain. What this means is that the code that is to be executed if the proposal passes is actually uploaded in the proposal itself. So this is publicly verifiable. Anyone can see that, okay, if this proposal passes, if it meets quorum requirements and support rates, then these funds will actually be automatically sent to XYZ. So for proposals that deal with treasury spending, the quorum level is 3%, meaning that in order for the proposal to pass, at least 3% of all votable tokens, which is the ARB governance token, need to either vote for or abstain for the proposal. And then, yeah, once this passes, then the funds are automatically executed by smart contracts. If people aren't familiar with what smart contracts are, I like to think of smart contracts as promise keepers. So basically, they will execute on a decision as long as certain conditions are met. When it comes to, I guess, the legal regulation element of it, the Arbitrum Foundation, which is who I work for, we are the legal entity that represent the DAO. And another way of saying this is being the legal wrapper. So before a proposal is passed, we will actually do compliance checks and make sure that anyone receiving funds is actually compliant, so that once the proposal passes and the funds are sent autonomously, it's all okay.
Bill, would you like to add something, or like maybe like draft a comparison? It would be great.
Yeah, so there are a lot of similar items of how the Polkadot governance system works to Arbitrum's, in that although we have a much more informal process before the on-chain vote, there's no formal there are off-chain discussions, but then there are there's an on-chain vote where a little piece of code is essentially voted on, and if it passes, then it executes automatically. So there are some technical differences. It's not smart contracts, but it's a different type of system, but the same basic idea. So with OpenGov, which is our form of governance, it's essentially one dot, one vote on not just where the treasury goes, but also changing parameters of the network, upgrading it. Everything is done everything is voted on by the dot holders. And essentially, the more people that vote on it, the faster it can pass. So this this quorum level that Ron was talking about, we actually have a dynamic version of that. So for most of the time, this is just sending dot tokens. If you're doing a treasury proposal that is asking for funds, we have different ways of doing this. There are bounties where people have essentially RFPs, requests for proposals. There's a regular treasury proposal where someone can come up with any idea, etc. Generally, this is just a transfer of dot tokens on chain from one account to another from the system's perspective. Obviously, sometimes we need to interact with the real world, and we also have a legal wrapper, the Polkadot Community Foundation. And so you can actually issue some text, and the blockchain will essentially say this text, which directs the community foundation to do something on its behalf. So we also have seen that there needs to be some sort of legal entity associated with the DAO if you're doing anything that's not just on chain. Once it reaches out into the real world to do something.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify two things because they might be, for those that are not really familiar with DAOs, I know it can sound a little bit complicated when we start to describe the governance part. Like the complexities of DAO actually comes into the selection of jurisdictions and wrappers, but also at the governance level because we have a lot of possibilities, especially when it comes to blockchain. When they were mentioned that you transfer the tokens is like the votes. So it's not that there is a transfer of funds. The transfer of funds only happen once the proposal is approved, and then there is a selection, and then the legal wrapper in both of these cases transfer that money to the proposals that were awarded that grant, right? So it's a little bit like just that clarification because at some point sounded that it was one vote, one token, but it's just at the voting level. It's not that you are actually transfer funds when you are voting. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, that's correct. So yeah, when you're voting, you are like voting. What I mean is the power of your vote is not per account or per person, but rather on a per token basis. So if I have 500 tokens and you have one token, then I have 500 times the power. In the Polkadot DAO, there are lots of other ways to do this with proof of personhood, etc. But when I say one token, one vote, or one dot, one vote, yeah, that's what I mean.
Great. That's actually, like, by the way, curious note why we say that, like, in some blockchains the decisions are plutocratic and not democratic, because it's a matter of how much tokens you have. I saw Ran with the hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of clarify one thing you mentioned. So you said that once the vote passes, it's up to the legal entity to then transfer the funds. It really depends. So if you're actually transferring funds that exist on the blockchain already, so crypto assets, then these funds can be sent automatically without needing any entity or foundation to be involved. But sometimes if it requires the funds to be converted into traditional currency, then the legal entity can support in doing that. And then, yeah, as Bill mentioned, I guess the description of the proposal will actually describe what the entity is mandated to do in distributing the funds according to what the proposal describes.
I was trying to not go into those details, but at the end, there is a wallet that controls the fund, and there needs to be an order, whether it's by the smart contract or it is the foundation that controls, the one that gives the order to do the payment. Those are like the different two ways. But at the end, it is that part, the ones that does the payment. Nina, I'm going to hold there because I wanted to go back to the question of Dino, because I think that this is something like circling back to where we started the discussion. These are like really different parts that, like, that's what I call it, a puzzle, right? Because there are like different parts that come together. What we are seeing here is that a lot of what we are discussing is a new tool or a new system or experiment, a social experiment if you want, that will help us to incentivize communities to be part of the decision-making process, so have a voice to both, and at the same time have more transparency on the decisions that are being taken by those communities, at the same time that defining who can be part of those communities, right? Like how you vote and who can vote. Dean, I wanted to circle back to you because this is how we started as the example of like really brief governance systems. And then I saw you have your hand. So it was the question related to the wrapper, right?
Thank you, Mariana. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. I really appreciate the calming approach that Nina shared with us. But at the same time, she actually pointed to the one of the major issues that we have. So we, as a dynamic coalition, we are not a UN entity, and therefore we do not have the privileges, immunities, and the tax exemption. But the point is that ultimately, in order to produce something, in order to conduct research, in order to write reports, in order to issue recommendations, we need to engage with consultants, we need to engage with subject matter experts. Therefore, we need to potentially manage fund donation. And the moment that we start receiving assets of value, we need to identify what is our tax jurisdiction. And that's where we face the biggest challenge. Because the moment that you start receiving financial resources, in whatever form they may take, we need to identify as an entity operating in a global environment how we're going to define ourselves, in accordance with which jurisdiction and which requirement, for example, and especially for taxation, in order to preserve also potential liabilities of the members of the DAO. So that's basically the issue that we're still struggling with. But going back now to the second question that you asked me, I just want to add an aspect that, again, certain things you are appreciating only when you're actually working hands-on on an issue. So we, as we already alluded to, we are all concerned about participation. We are concerned about token. We are all concerned about voting rights, and so forth and so on. But in so doing, we also realize that within the IGF principles and values, there is the principle that we shall allow people just to be observers. So we need to account for a role for someone who wants to have the right legitimate right that we need to acknowledge and recognize to participate in the process just by observing without voting, and therefore be acknowledged as or ever being part of the decision-making process. So these are the additional, if you will, scenario that we started to identify in building that governance structure, that the voting mechanism, but most importantly, the participatory mechanism that we need to take into account when define who does what, how, when, and why. So that's, I think I just wanted to add this additional dimension vis-a-vis your question, which I think is very pertinent, very relevant. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dino. It's just like fun how fun topics always end up in taxes. I thought that was a German thing, but no, apparently it happens everywhere. But out of the joke, I think that that's one of the most important topics when we discuss, when we are discussing legal, like where to set up the jurisdiction for this DAO. And I think, and this with this, I'm gonna go back to you, Nina. I think that like a lot of people is under the wrong impression that they can actually select where they going to just like do the registration, although the operations are happening in other parts, and they tend to just like go because of tax benefits, for example. Can you please enlighten us, Nina, for those that are not lawyers, if this perception, is it true or is it not? How does it work?
Well, that differs, depends upon where you are on the globe, because we have roughly 200 jurisdictions, plus then, some regional jurisdictions as well. And each jurisdiction does it in its own way, so to speak. So I can talk about a high tax jurisdiction, Germany. And our tax authority is always keen to get as much taxes as possible and to prevent people from fleeing out of the tax regime from Germany. So if you are actually located in Germany, you can open as many foundations in offshore countries as you wish, as long as you remain physically here in Germany. This thing will reside in Germany, full stop, right? So you involuntarily move that thing that you formed in, I don't know, St. Lucia, British Virgin Islands, Panama, you name it. You will move it into Germany. So that's one common problem. And then since a lot of DAOs don't really choose a formal legal wrapper, they also face the challenge that any jurisdiction that has any connection to such DAO might claim to have jurisdiction. So you might face the issue that multiple jurisdictions say, hey, you're residing with us, which then simply, accelerates the problem. So, Dino, for your case, I can only recommend, use the DAO tool really only as a technical tool, but don't claim to really be a separate organization, right? So the name DAO in this case might be a little bit misleading, right? It's like a decentralized autonomous governance tool, but maybe not really an organization as such.
And with that, I want to go back to those that actually are a DAO, because this is a big difference, right? Like one is like if you are using some of the principles that come from the DAO idea, but more from a governance perspective and the management of a community, rather than actually using it as an organization that is distributing funds, has accountability, and it might have like some liability connected to the people that is part of these communities. Of course, I want to go back to both the case of Arbitrum and Polkadot, because your communities are huge. So it is not possible that there is going to be liability connected to each of the members, because I guess it is not even possible to identify all the members and who holds like the tokens. Probably one person can have 4 wallets. So it's like, it's like really, it gets really complicated. So how do you see these issues in your particular communities?
So just to clarify the question of these decisions, do you mean in terms of liability?
In terms of how you manage it, like you see, because both of you said that you are the biggest DAO or one of the biggest DAOs. So are you really a DAO? Like in the same sort of like an organization that has taxes, legal wrappers, all the liability for the members, or is more also a community that is like has a governance process that is enhancing the technology?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I think of Polkadot as a DAO because as an actual, in a sense, an entity. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer, so please, if I have my phrasing slightly wrong here, I apologize. But it does have, its own treasury. It's not, just used as a voting tool, right? There isn't there is a wrapper around it that is directed by the DAO. It can only do something if directed to do so by the DAO. And to me, like, this is what makes a DAO, as opposed to some entities that call themselves DAOs, but they're really just using, this is a great term of just like a distributed autonomous, voting voting tool or governance tool, to direct that, as opposed to the decisions, if something happens in Polkadot, if people vote for the number of validators to change, or a runtime upgrade to occur, or this account to send DOT or stable coins or whatever from this account to this account, it occurs. To me, like, this is what makes a DAO, that it is something that the decisions will automatically and autonomously occur, as opposed to just a voting mechanism, and then you have a separate entity next to it. Now, that this is my definition, I think people could disagree with that. I'd be happy. I'm also looking forward to hearing Rom's take as well.
Yeah, sure. I probably have a similar answer to Bill. Obviously, I'm also not a lawyer, so I come from more of a technical and maybe philosophical perspective that a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, as long as it's truly decentralized, that decisions can be executed autonomously, and yeah, it's organizing itself in this manner, then it can call itself a DAO. I would argue that a DAO is more defined by having on-chain governance and having minimal dependence on any third parties or intermediaries to do what they vote on. To me, that's more of a DAO than an organization that might use blockchain to record votes, but then will still have dependencies on a third party or an agency to actually execute what it wants to do. That being said, there's no one size fits all, right? In the purest DAOs, they are best suited for purely technical use cases. So people say that Bitcoin is the purest DAO because, the rules are fixed. It's the community that has to approve of new transactions that get added to the blockchain, and it's this consensus that happens cryptographically that then updates the state of the chain. Now DAOs are used. I mean, the definition itself can be used in different ways, but they're used across use cases. But I think the more that a DAO interacts with traditional systems and traditional legal systems, then there are dependencies on entities like foundations to actually help the DAO interact with these legal systems. Again, I touched upon this previously, but the Arbitrum Foundation is the legal wrapper for the Arbitrum DAO. So in terms of like distributing any funds, anyone who is going to be receiving funds from the DAO will have to pass compliance. In terms of liability, the foundation actually has a captive insurance product, sorry. So that will support any claims made against Arbitrum DAO token holders up to 10 million, I believe. So yes, I do think Arbitrum is a DAO, and when I consider a DAO, I don't think of DAOs specifically as legal organizations. I think of organizations more broadly speaking as a collective of people or a community.
I love these interactions because it's just like it just allowed me to play devil's advocate. I've been doing a lot of DAOs from the legal part as well. Like I just posted some of the articles for those that are curious to see some comparison in jurisdictions, but also some perspectives beyond Arbitrum and Polkadot, because we ran some interviews that were really interesting with other communities and DAOs with and without wrappers. So everyone has a different take, and this is where it's become interesting, right? And if we try to just like make it super simple, well, like DAO is decentralized autonomous organization. If we look at word by word, like when we talk about organization, this is where like the red flags that Nina was talking about, the legal wrappers and what happens if you don't have one, who is going to be liable, where are you liable, what are the taxes, all of this comes with the O, right? Autonomous for me is like super clear as well. That is just like the decisions need to be implemented autonomous, right? So it is not one person, two person, there is like some blockchain via smart contracts that has been implemented there as well. That is the one that is actually like doing this, because otherwise it's not autonomous, right? So this part, I think that like when a lot of people talks about DAOs, tend to forget about that autonomous part. But the decentralized, and Ram, you just brought it up, so like, I need to take it from there. You talk about like purely decentralization, and this might be one of the heaviest issues we have right now at the practical level, at the regulatory level, because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if someone can actually like tell me right away what is truly decentralized, it will be great, because everyone has different definitions about it. It's a matter of how many people participate, how many people actually like have the decision-making power of those decisions, or if we actually like need to not know how many people is there, and that is actually like truly decentralized, right? So this is one of the main questions. So one, and I'm playing devil's advocate here just because like to feed my curiosity and probably from the people that is watching as well, but will you say that actually like having a legal wrapper will go against that decentralization purpose and original intent of the DAOs?
So, sorry, Rom, I'll go first. I mean, I think like it really, I mean, obviously this depends on who you ask, and you can imagine like the early cypherpunks in the '90s saying that like, oh, this is, being invested in this system at all, right, or having any interaction with the system is just a total, right, that just throws everything out the window. I've always said like, decentralization is a spectrum, right? There is, something from, all right, every single person in the entire world, has a vote versus, we have one dictator, and everything in between is something like that, right? I don't think you can say, okay, at some point, like, this is considered decentralized, or that this is not. So I do think, when you have this interaction with, like these legal wrappers or other sort of, anytime you have like some sort of known real world entity interaction, really, you're losing in some sense, some of that decentralization. But I think that doesn't mean that you are losing decentralization, right? It's a spectrum. Like maybe you say that this is a little bit less decentralized because there now is, one other, like, sort of centralized channel out of it. But, I think anything you say about that, you talk about Bitcoin, which people put as sort of the gold standard of decentralization, but okay, there are only a few people that can commit code to the Bitcoin core code base, right? I think like 5 people have the commit bit. That can actually put code on that. And, not everybody is reviewing that code. There's a lot of trust on either the people reviewing that code or the people writing that code. So I think anytime we have this so I sort of like disagree honestly with the question, right? Of, like talking about decentralization as a binary, I think sort of misses the point of, yes, like this does, perhaps reduce decentralization from something that's totally pure, but that doesn't mean that like it makes things bad or worse or totally not decentralized by having it.
Thank you. That's like, I guess, the middle ground that we are always pushing when this question comes around with the, and you're actually like put it really simple. It's not a binary issue or like whether you are or not. There is a spectrum. So I really take that one because that's a really good to simplified the explanation. Does anyone want to say something else? Because otherwise I want to go back of like what is actually like this important beyond if it's truly decentralized or not, beyond if there is a wrapper or not a wrapper, beyond if there is autonomous or not, and it's to something that Dino brought up since the beginning, and it was what is the problem that we are intended to solve with DAOs. But before that, Ram, do you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Bill said. So I fully agree about on this definition and views on progressive decentralization. All DAOs fit somewhere on the spectrum, and I think not just for like legal or decentralization reasons, right? For practical reasons too. DAOs need to balance decentralization and efficiency. Those things typically exist on a spectrum. Structure and flexibility as well. Those things exist on a spectrum, and accordingly, you see especially bigger DAOs, because it's impractical that everyone has to vote on everything and do everything all the time. That would just be pure chaos. So the larger a DAO gets, it typically gets quite fractal and polycentric. So what this means is that the DAO itself will create sub-organizations, working groups, committees. They will grant these, let's say, sub-organizations with the authority to do certain things, and take on certain responsibilities, work towards specific objectives, to become a bit more streamlined. But ultimately, the reason why you can still call it decentralized is because the DAO has ultimate control. So all of these organizations that are being incepted by the DAO, they are still accountable back to the DAO. The DAO could, if they wanted to, claw back the power of funding from these sub-organizations at any given time. And this is also partly why, in my opinion, some DAOs choose foundations. I mean, I don't think there are many legal entities that perfectly fit the philosophy of what a DAO tries to be. As Bill mentioned, there is a trade-off. But with foundations, for example, they can be ownerless, and you can actually have it in the bylaws that the token holders can actually have control over the foundation, replace the director of the foundation, etc. Interestingly, in Arbitrum's case, the first proposal that the Arbitrum Foundation put to the DAO was actually to get the DAO to approve of the of the foundation's budget. So in that sense, the foundation is accountable to the DAO, and the DAO, if they wanted to, has control to like cut the foundation's budget stream. And I think that's like a key nuance and represents the decentralized pillar in this instance.
Two things before giving to you, Nina, is just like actually what you just mentioned of like what they grow is really difficult to make decisions. I think that this is something that we experience everywhere, and I think that this is important to circle back to something that you both mentioned. This is also like why some decisions have a threshold. So once you pass them, they can move, because if you expect like waiting until everyone participate and make the decision, we will be waiting forever. The other thing, and I said like I'm making like a lot of like I'm playing devil advocate here to just like trying to spice the conversation. But one thing is also what is ideal in paper, and the other thing is the reality, right? And not talking about any specific case, but when we are talking about the proposals in which the members have certain control over the foundations and the DAO, we also need to have in mind that the foundations have tokens as well. And those tokens are not a small portion. Foundations tend to keep a lot of those tokens, and they vote. So at the end, they can also decide the direction of those proposals. And if it's not convenient for them, then sometimes they vote in different decisions. Not talking about the case of anyone, just saying this is actually a possibility because of how the system is built. And when you have plutocratic systems, the more token you have, more votes and more weight your votes will have. And that is something that is known in the industry as the whales. If you want to know more about that, I can just like Google some links and send you and explain you what are whales and how it works. But this is basically where we see also like that decentralization issue in practice also comes into doubts, and it just actually like break trust in the system itself, although the system is there to build trust. I'm going to give it back to you, Nina, but I really want to go back to what is the problem that we want to solve, because I think technology is just a tool and we need to do something with it. So if we are not solving things and issues, then what are we doing, right? And we just experimented with new things. So Nina, go for it.
Yeah, just want to pick up one thing, a strong recommendation from my side. You know, governance is a topic for centuries, right? So please, I can only invite like the Coder community to go back into the history of like democratic theory, right? There's a lot to learn there, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's one point. Then I want to support your point. You know, plutocratic systems, that's what had been typically built with DAOs, always have the issue that people try to get more, right? You know, we humans are greedy. We can't help it, right? So there will always be people trying to get as much tokens as possible, and that endangers then the whole nature of the DAO. And in that regard, I actually would like to say that I'm personally not a fan of foundations anymore, because foundations are the least democratic entity we have at hand. So that's why you see nowadays a lot of those like guiding associations being in form of an association. What is the difference? Foundations do not have members, right? They are typically guided by directors, which are appointed for more or less their lifetime. And Ram, I would be really curious to learn how you actually, the DAO can enforce the exchange of directors or the dismissal of directors, because legally speaking, I think that's not possible. It's a commitment, but if you withdraw that commitment, then the DAO can do whatever they like, but they wouldn't get the director off the board. That's at least my understanding. So that is why I think, associations are the more honest and more democratic vehicle to choose, but they are way more difficult to handle, right, Mariana? We know what we are talking about. We formed a number of those. So that's the tricky part about the associations. And then if there is an economic purpose behind it, please consider co-ops, right? Co-ops are typically, the vehicle that you choose when you want to form something that supports the economic interest of its members. So that was this. Thanks.
Thank you, Nina. I also want to give some time to the people to ask questions, but I actually wanted to just ask Dina, Ram, and Bill, the three of you, if you can just maybe mention what is the problem that you're trying to solve with having a DAO, or what was happening before you came with this concept, say okay, what I need to do is I need to create a DAO. Let's start with you, Dina.
Thank you, Mariana. Well, I think, I hope that my slides were suitable to address that question. In our case, it was really about making sure that we had an immutable evidence of our decision-making process within the context of the terms of reference of the UNIGF, by addressing at the same time our non-UN nature operating within a UN framework. So try to demonstrate at the same time our level of compliance and our level of accountability in managing in an informal group that, however, operates within a very formal, a very structured framework of principle, of values, but also of code of conduct, because there is also a specific code of conduct. That's the first thing. The second thing, maybe also going back to what you were saying when you try to make a distinction, what is decentralization? Is exactly about going beyond the technical nature of the tool and the platform. There was a question before in the chat. We are trying to basically create, an apology here, my auditor hat comes in. We're trying to create a transparent and corroborative evidence that indeed we are decentralized, not only from the point of view of having nodes dispersed across the network in different geographical locations that can support adequate consensus mechanism and so forth, that will be able to withstand the 51% attacks and so forth and so on. But also that, as you alluded to, Mariana, I think very appropriately, can support the decentralization of the participation. And again, there was a very relevant question in the chat before. What if ultimately you find yourself that everybody's just an observer? Well, that's exactly the point. We want to have a tool that can immutably demonstrate that the DAO is not active, is not working, is not operating. Hence, it should be turned off. It should be terminated. That's exactly the point of trying to have finally some sort of corroborating evidence of supporting decision, whether or not, even to the ultimate level of determining whether the DAO should exist or should be terminated. Back to you.
Thank you, Dina. That's actually I couldn't agree more that it's good that like you are in a position where you can make an experiment and just like see if this actually is working or not. And if it's not working, just decide that it was not the right tool. And if it's working, then see how to scale. I love the pilots approach. So I think that is a great idea. Ram, thank you for the clarification. I think that that's really important because that also like brings light on how the governance process works. For those that didn't read on the chat, Ram actually says that in the case of Arbitrium, the foundation cannot vote. So this is actually like a mitigation strategy that some foundations have taken as well to just avoid that these questions as the one that I was presenting. On that note, Ram, do you want to actually walk us through of like what was the problem that you guys were trying to solve?
Yeah, so for clarity, I wasn't at the foundation when the Arbitrum DAO was incepted. This was 2 years ago now. I've only been at the foundation for less than a year and a half. But in my opinion, it comes down to alignment, ensuring that the users, the builders, the people who are passionate about a platform, in this case being Arbitrum blockchains, actually get to steer the direction of the technology. So this means proposing upgrades, approving upgrades, proposing how the treasury is spent to actually grow the ecosystem and allocate capital towards initiatives that they personally want to see. So yeah, it's about increasing alignment and also removing the barrier between us and them. I think in traditional organizations, in Web2 especially, you see a distinction between the product team and the user. With DAOs, you are dissolving that barrier because as a community member, you actually can contribute to the team that is building the product you are using.
I agree. I actually I think that you both like are summarizing like different parts. So Bill, I'm just going to summarize the parts that I heard, and then you can just let me know if in your case is different. But like Dino was talking more about transparency and compliance at the same time that he was talking about like the participation of the group and identifying who is active and who is not. And then Ram brings a really key point that I think that is the reason that like any single group should come together and is like this alignment on a common vision. In your case, is something similar? There's something that they didn't cover, or?
No, I mean, I think, yeah, actually, I also want to bring in some things Nina said too about foundations, all into one topic, which yeah, I mean, we came together as a goal because we believe, and this is part of our founding documents, we believe in a decentralized internet where people can control their own destiny. And own their own data. So, this is like, we're a Stiftung. We have apologies for my German pronunciation, but we are we have a goal, right, of bringing about the decentralized internet. And, I think we can all agree, right, having a foundation is almost by definition, not decentralized. That is a bit of a centralizing entity. And so part of having a DAO and giving, bit by bit more decision-making power to this DAO, part of that is to eliminate us, right? The network, the Polkadot network, we see that as sort of the foundation of this decentralized internet. And if you don't want to have centralized entities making decisions, then by definition you then need some other entities, thus a decentralized version of this. And so we have been like slowly adding more and more governance control over more and more things as we go on, including having our technical fellowship be entirely on chain. So I think this is the goal, right? We see if we want to meet this goal of like what we as a foundation have been set up to do, we need to make sure that people can make these decisions as part of DAOs so that we can eventually not be necessary.
I like that, and I think that was you, the one that mentioned cyberpunks, and that like this gives me a really thorough like a scan of your personality. But like this is true, right? Like this is like why this technology actually was created with like a purpose. Like at least how I see it and why I fell in love with it is because I really believe that it's a tool to just give back the power to the people, the power of the data, the power of their money, the back to them, right? And this is, as Ramos also like mentioned, something that it doesn't happen from one moment to another, but it's actually a process. And by creating these different systems in which people can have more ownership and participate and be engaged with a common vision, it actually goes in that direction where maybe we need those centralized entities for now, while there is actually a community that take over and just like manage that by themselves. My legal brain sometimes just like trying to just like get like shocked when I say those things because like in practice and legally this gets really complicated. I immediately saw Nina like, wait a second. I was just and I'm gonna give it back to you, but like I think that like we need to remember why this like this topics came into life, what was the idea behind those topics, what we were trying to do. And at the end, that was what they want to do is to empower communities to make decisions that will impact them. And by creating like different incentive schemes and different processes, as Dino was saying, also like we want to have like some experts and know how they're voting, and there are like these like also different ways of creating governance. One token, we have like more complex like quadratic voting, and now we have technology that actually allow us to do this and incentivize and bring this to communities. So I'm gonna give it back to you, Nina, and then I want to just like check if there is like some questions on the room. If you still have them, just like click there so we can go over. But at the end, I don't want anyone that is looking at this webinar to look at DAOs like as something complex and that is not necessary, but actually like looking at like as an opportunity to innovate in the way in which your communities and your groups at your office or I don't know, music clubs you have can make decisions in a different way. Nina, you're mute. You're still mute.
I wanted to share a little bit of light about like the historic background why the blockchain space actually started with choosing foundations, right? So I think the idea behind it was that they were looking for a legal setup which replicates the idea of DAOs, right? And a foundation or Stiftung is the vehicle which is mostly set on autopilot, right? There are people coming together, forming this thing and giving it a purpose and putting some funds in. And then this the foundation is supposed to basically run on autopilot and to fulfill its purpose. So I think that's where this is coming from. And then it was, I think, a learning over time. And the first large one was the LIBA GM association to switch more over to the association side of things. And I think either one, you know, which type you choose, it's always the route that you want to reach ultimate decentralization. And, you know, the foundations claim to make themselves unnecessary. But I do see a remaining purpose with all of these associations and foundations, and that is to give the discussion that is not happening on chain a home, right? To facilitate the discussions that ultimately lead to the decision that is then taken on chain, right? I think that purpose will always remain for all of these, you know, associations, foundations that come alongside the layer 1 or 2 DAOs out there.
I agree, but I don't think that the foundations are the ones or the only ones that can perform that role. I would like to see the communities actually performing that role and doing that moderation, right? But this is also like a process. I actually saw that like Dino went super proactive and answered all the questions. So there's no more questions unsolved on the room. Like thank you, Dino, for that. So I want to actually have like one last question from each of you, so we can finish maybe with a positive note. And is what are you doing in your foundations, in your associations, in your role as members of the IGF? Nina, you are in like 100 boards and expert groups. So what is it that you're doing actually like to help people outside of the blockchain bubble to understand the benefits of DAOs and governance in the terms of the blockchain space? So let's start backwards. So I'm gonna go with Ram.
Yeah, so I haven't joined the IGF yet, but we'll definitely be keeping more of a close eye on this dynamic coalition in particular. And yeah, I would love to see how we can use blockchain to govern ourselves and align on certain standards and best practices, etc., which is how I see this dynamic coalition serve its purpose. In terms of what else I do, so I do give quite a few talks, specializing on different use cases. I've given talks on how DAOs can apply to sports, have worked with a few organizations in the regenerative finance space who are also looking to operate more like a DAO. Because yeah, ultimately, I do see this as a way to coordinate in a more egalitarian way. Obviously, there are a lot of bottlenecks and complexities and challenges, but it all comes down to human design, in my opinion. So the more we experiment, the more we prove the benefits of organizing ourselves like this. I hope that we can see DAOs being applied across industries and not just limited to the tech space.
Thank you. I think that that's actually like one of the major challenges, not only for DAOs, but for the tech industry, is to try to make it easy and digestible for others. Bill, let's go with you. But while Bill answers, I actually almost forget to do this. And is that I hope that you can see my screen and only the one part that I'm sharing. But we created actually a Telegram group because we thought that there was a lot of like interest on the topic. So before you started to just like leave to other meetings, you can scan this, enjoy the Telegram chat, and make questions there. If you have any questions about DAOs or want to share any experience or just like request information, every speaker that is here is already there. So we are going to be happy to keep the conversation offline. This is not a DAO, it's just a Telegram chat. So just feel free to join, no commitment, and make questions. Bill?
Yeah, thanks. So I think, much like Ram, I give a lot of talks, both inside the blockchain community as well as outside to groups like this. I spend a lot of my day in this little box giving talks. But I think like something important that we are doing at Web3 Foundation is also researching DAOs in our ecosystem as well as the Polkadot DAO. We have several researchers here focusing on that in order to figure out what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks as well, and how can we make it better. And so I think like a big part of what we're doing here at the foundation is not just spreading the word about DAOs, but also figuring out, all right, what's working, how can we make them better, what are the learnings from this that we can then spread to other people, so that when people do ask about setting up a DAO, we can say, all right, here's what you can expect, here's how to do it better. And I think that's going to make it a really big difference, because if you're first time starting out with a DAO, you make a lot of mistakes, right? We have made some of these mistakes in the past and we have learned from them. And we've made different trade-offs and we can explain them more. And I think that's also a very big part of my job and the foundation here.
Thank you. I can agree more with that. Like I think that education is one of the things that we need to focus the most. And you just like call also like in a really important thing that is just like, why do people think that they need a DAO? Probably those that have been in the blockchain space already long can know, like me, have always come like with like people that want to start using blockchain, and then when you start making some questions, what they really want is a database, and you just like send them to just like get a database because that's cheaper and less complex. So not because it's just like a hot topic, it means that it will solve the problems that you wanted to solve. So I think that also the purpose and education, as you mentioned, Bill, are really, really, really important. Dino.
Thank you. Yeah, so as I alluded to before, definitely my primary domain is digital identity. I'm continuing to enhance and improve the certification, the standard compliance. First and foremost, I did the ISO 27001, then the 42001. We are the first UN entity to be certified with the ISO standard on responsible ethical use of artificial intelligence, because it's embedded in our digital identity solution. And I started to look at the problem of quantum computing, the threats that quantum computing poses to blockchain. I started to interact with Hyperledger, because Hyperledger is the platform that we are using, and started to address the issue of harvesting now, decrypting later. So I want to make sure that, again, going back to those famous 193 countries that are part of my board, I can show that the due diligence is in place, and that although we don't have all the answer, at least we're trying to identify the risk and the threats. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Dino. Always one step forward. You're already talking about
I
cyber.
wish.
Thank you very much. And Nina?
Yeah, I think DAOs come with the great opportunity to get people more involved again. I think through the past decade, we saw that people go more and more private, kids traveling not that much anymore, staying home, playing with their mobile devices. And I think this is kind of threatening to harm the democracies around the globe. And this really gives us a chance to maybe reorganize things, right? Historically grown jurisdictions, which are defined by their geography, might not really be the way ultimately forward in a digital and globally connected world. So I like to see blockchains and DAOs specifically as organizational tools around topics rather than geographic regions, which could maybe at some point in time, gain their own jurisdiction, so to speak. So that would be like my vision going forward.
That really resonates with me, at least. I will not only say the topics but also like functions. I have seen like really interesting experimentation on where they have like different wrappers for the function that particular entity is performing, and then they have a governance structure on how they come together. That's way more complex, maybe for another discussion. If you're interested in that, in the second paper that I shared, there is a case study that is actually doing that. And also on the website, there is a paper that Nina actually contributed to, where we did a proposal to the European institutions on how to look at DAOs. And we propose some books to start to just like look at this. But these are like for the jurisdiction and the regulatory complexities. This doesn't solve the governance perspective. If you're interested in governance, Project Liberty did a really cool report on the different forms of governance that are present in the blockchain ecosystem. I can try to, I will send it on the group now that like everyone is there. I think that's faster. Last 5 minutes, I have like some announcements for you if you want to just join or participate. The IGF working group, the meeting of the blockchain, Dino, please correct me if I say it wrong because I'm so bad with names. Blockchain Assurance and Standardization Working Group of the IGF is on the 16th of this month. If you are interested in joining on the websites that we share, you can register and be part. As Dino mentioned, this is open for absolutely everyone. If you need more information or want to have a previous discussion before joining, just reach out to Dino, myself, and also I will contact you with Gerard. He's really good at presenting what we are doing on the different working groups. The IGF meeting is also at the end of this month, is in the Nordics, so that information is also public. If you want to go there and meet Dino in person, you can also go there. If you happen to be in Berlin in the next 2 weeks for the Berlin Blockchain Week, Nina and I are organizing 2 roundtables. One is about privacy preserving tools. It's going to be really interesting because we're going to be discussing the Tornado Cash, which has been like really news everywhere. So from people in and outside the industry, they know the reference at least. And then the second one on the 16th, we are going to be talking about DeFi. So we are going to be discussing some of these questions of how we define decentralization, and these are conversations for experts. So just reach out. It's invite only, so reach out to me and Nina. We will make exception for our friends in the UN if you want to participate on those conversations. Last 3 minutes, that any one of you want to say something? Otherwise, Helena, thank you very much, and thank you to Theodore and all the team and UNDP for inviting us and organizing these sessions. Last words?
If nothing, I can jump in. Thank you so much. It was so interesting to hear from all of you. Mariana, such a pleasure to hear. This is amazing mentor moderating. It was really, really a pleasure. Nina, Dino, Rem, and Billy, thank you so much for joining. I hope we will meet again. Yes, we will discuss more in our Telegram group. Mariana, thank you for creating this. Yes, this is our fourth blockchain talks. Thank you for joining. We will send you recording, and we are going to have a break during the summer, and we are coming back with a new blockchain talk in September, and we will inform you the topic speakers, and you will be also, yes, engaged to that. We are also going to be in Berlin Blockchain Week. We are having 2 days events, Smart Futures, organized with Cardano. So we are going also sending you invites to participate online with us if you can join.
I will be
This
there
is
on the
it.
12th. So I will.
Yes, great. Yes, yes, yes. Super. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you very
Bye.
much.